The hospital hallway was silent at 2 in the morning when Ray Porter stopped mid-swipe. His mop handle froze in place. Through the glass window of room 304, monitors beeped steadily around a young woman who hadn't opened her eyes in 6 months. But Ray saw something the doctors missed, a slight flutter beneath her eyelids when he hummed that old lullaby. His hands, calloused from years of cleaning floors, once held scalpels in operating rooms, once saved lives. Now they gripped a janitor's mop, hiding a secret that could save a dying girl or destroy what little he had left. When Ray walked into Harrison Brooks' office the next morning and said, "I can wake your daughter," the millionaire's face twisted with rage. A janitor, claiming the impossible. But something in Ray's eyes, steady, professional, haunted, made Brooks pause. What this janitor knew about the human brain could either perform a miracle or reveal a past that Ray had spent 10 years trying to forget. Will a father's desperate hope collide with another father's buried tragedy? The fluorescent lights hummed above Ray Porter as he pushed his cleaning cart down the corridor of St. Catherine Hospital at 2:15 in the morning. He'd worked this shift for 2 years, knowing every sound, every shadow of the intensive care wing. His phone showed a text from Kenny, his 9-year-old son. "Dad, I'm fine. Mrs. Chen checked on me." Ray smiled despite the ache in his chest and typed back, "Love you, buddy." Through the glass of room 304, he could see Melody Brooks, 24 years old, heiress to the Brooks fortune, lying motionless for 6 months. Severe traumatic brain injury. Glasgow coma scale of 5. The doctors had stopped saying recovery months ago. Ray entered quietly, beginning his routine, emptying trash, wiping surfaces. As he worked, he hummed softly, an old melody his wife used to sing before she died. "You are my sunshine," the same song he sang to Kenny over the phone each night. He was reaching for the window blinds when something made him stop. The monitor. Heart rate climbing from 62 to 68. Ray's hand froze. 64. 66. 63. Fluctuating. His gaze shifted to Melody's face, the slightest tremor beneath her closed eyelids. He pulled out his notepad and began documenting. 2:17 a.m. Auditory stimulation. Observable response. Elevated heart rate. REM-like eye movement. For 20 minutes, Ray alternated between humming and silence, watching the pattern repeat. When he sang, her body reacted. When he stopped, she settled. It wasn't much, but it was real. Ray Porter wasn't just a janitor. He was a man who'd spent 15 years studying the human brain, who'd performed over 300 neurological surgeries. He was also a man who'd walked away from it all 10 years ago, on the day he couldn't save the one person who mattered most, his wife. Ray knew he couldn't walk away. By 6 a.m., he'd made his decision. He clocked out, changed clothes, and headed to the administrative wing. At the main desk, he said simply, "I need to speak with Harrison Brooks about his daughter. Tell him someone has information about Melody's condition." The receptionist's skepticism was immediate. "A janitor wants to speak to Harrison Brooks?" Ray held her gaze. "Yes, it's urgent." She made him wait 4 hours. At 10:45, an assistant appeared. "Mr. Brooks will see you now. 5 minutes." Ray followed through corridors to a corner office overlooking the city. Harrison Brooks sat behind a massive desk. Mid-50s, steel gray hair, eyes that looked like they hadn't known peace in months. "You have 5 minutes," Brooks said flatly. Ray stood straight. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Ray Porter. I work nights in ICU. Last night, I observed a neurological response in your daughter. When I hummed a melody while cleaning, her vitals changed. Heart rate increased. REM movement. I documented it over 20 minutes. The pattern was consistent." Brooks leaned back, jaw tightening. A janitor made a medical observation that neurologists missed for 6 months. His voice dripped with disbelief. Ray took a breath. I'm telling you what I saw. The auditory cortex can remain active in severe coma states. Music stimulates neural pathways that other interventions can't reach. Brooks interrupted. Stop. Who are you really? No janitor talks like that. The moment hung heavy. Ray could walk away, maintain his anonymity. But Melody's face appeared in his mind, and behind it, his wife's. 10 years ago, I was Dr. Raymond Porter, neurosurgeon, specialized in traumatic brain injuries and coma recovery. I left after I failed to save my wife from a brain tumor. Haven't practiced since. Silence filled the office. Brooks stared, his expression shifting to desperate hope mixed with suspicion. Why should I believe you? Brooks walked to the window, silent for a long moment. I'll have you checked out. If you're lying, I'll have you arrested. If you're telling the truth, you get 1 week. Supervised. You don't touch her, don't interfere with treatment. Just do whatever you think works. If there's real change, we talk again. Ray nodded. Understood. Brooks pressed his intercom. Get me Dr. Fletcher. Now. Dr. Marcus Fletcher arrived furious. Silver-haired, sharp-featured, he valued protocol above all. When Brooks explained, Fletcher's refusal was immediate. Absolutely not. A former doctor working as a janitor, claiming he can heal with humming. This is pseudoscience and false hope. Brooks remained steel calm. I'm not asking permission, Marcus. Ray gets supervised access for 1 week. Every session monitored by nursing staff. Fletcher's face reddened. The hospital's liability. Brooks cut him off. I'll sign whatever waivers you need. 1 week. That's final. The arrangement was made despite Fletcher's cold fury. Ray got a visitor's badge, 2 pages of restrictions, and a schedule. 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. nightly. A nurse present always. He could not touch the patient or adjust equipment. He could only sing. That evening, Ray spent a few hours with Kenny before his shift. Their small apartment was clean but worn. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, filled with Kenny's drawings and library books. When Ray explained about helping the sick girl, Kenny nodded seriously. Like how you helped people before Mom died. The question hit hard. Something like that, Ray said softly. Kenny smiled. That's good, Dad. You're really good at helping people. Ray returned to St. Catherine at 10 p.m., this time as a visitor. Nurse Patricia met him, mid-40s, kind but skeptical. I'll be right outside. You follow the rules, or I end this immediately. Inside Melody's room, Ray pulled a chair close and began humming, You Are My Sunshine. Within minutes, the changes appeared. Heart rate climbing, eyelid flutter, breathing shifts. Patricia stepped inside, watching the monitors. That's unusual, she murmured. Ray kept singing, explaining the neurological basis. Patricia didn't leave. She stood documenting as Ray sang 3 times through, each repetition bringing the same responses. The pattern continued for 5 nights. Ray arrived at 10, sang the old lullabies, and Melody responded, heart rate varying, eye movements increasing, breathing patterns shifting. The nurses began watching from doorways, whispering in break rooms. By night 5, 3 nurses observed instead of 1. But on night 6, everything changed. Ray arrived to find Dr. Fletcher waiting, expression carved from ice. This experiment has run its course. Minor variations aren't neurological improvement. I'm also concerned about your excessive work hours. You're violating labor regulations. There's a disciplinary hearing tomorrow. Ray felt anger flare. This isn't about regulations. You don't want me here because it challenges your authority. Fletcher's face hardened. You abandoned medicine. Whatever skills you had are decade-old. I'm terminating this, effective immediately. Before Ray could respond, Harrison Brooks emerged from the shadows. That won't be necessary, Dr. Fletcher. Ray stays. Fletcher turned red. Harrison, be reasonable. Brooks moved between them. I've been reasonable for 6 months. Now I'm doing something different. Ray continues for the full week. That's final. Fletcher's jaw worked. I need to call a board meeting. The hospital's liability. Brooks stepped closer. Call whatever meeting you want, but understand, my family has donated $18 million to this hospital. I sit on your board. If you force me to choose between your protocols and my daughter's life, you won't like the consequences. Fletcher left in cold fury, and Brooks turned to Ray. Take a leave from your janitorial position. Paid. Focus on Melody. I'll handle the details. That night brought a new crisis. Mrs. Chen called. Kenny had high fever, severe strep throat. Ray rushed home, took his son to emergency, and stared at the $800 bill he couldn't pay. He had rent due, utilities overdue, $233 in checking. Mrs. Chen lent him $500 without hesitation. Ray sat in that emergency room chair beside Kenny's IV, wondering how he'd become the father who borrowed money from his elderly neighbor. He didn't make it to Melody's room that night. The next day, after Kenny was discharged, Ray found a text from Brooks. Hope Kenny's better. I paid your ER bill. It's handled. Come back when ready. That evening, Ray returned to St. Catherine. Kenny was better. Fever broken. Mrs. Chen paid back by Brooks's assistant, who'd appeared with cash. When Ray walked into Melody's room, Brooks sat in Ray's usual chair, red-rimmed eyes, exhausted. How's Kenny? Ray settled into the second chair. Better. Thank you. Brooks nodded. I've been sitting here thinking about how I've thrown money at this problem, and a janitor with old songs got more response than any specialist. He paused, voice rough. Fletcher's calling a board meeting tomorrow. He wants you banned. I told him if he forces you out, I withdraw my funding and resign from the board. Ray felt the weight of that decision. Why are you fighting for me? Brooks met his eyes. Because I lost Melody's mother when she was 7. Car accident. I was driving. We were arguing. Took my eyes off the road for 2 seconds. My wife died instantly. I had to tell my daughter it was Daddy's fault. I spent 17 years trying to make up for it. And now, he looked at Melody. Now, I might lose her too. You're giving me hope when everyone else gave up. Ray understood then. 2 fathers who'd lost their wives. 2 men carrying impossible guilt. What happened to your wife wasn't your fault, Ray said quietly. What happened to mine wasn't either. But Melody's still here, still fighting. Brooks stood, brought a worn teddy bear from a bag. This was Melody's. She called him Mr. Buttons. Maybe familiar objects will help. Ray nodded. Scents, textures, visual cues, all trigger memory. This is good. Brooks also brought a playlist of Melody's favorite songs. They decided to alternate. Ray would sing lullabies. Brooks would play her modern music and tell stories. That night, for the first time, Brooks stayed while Ray sang. And for the first time, Brooks held his daughter's hand and talked about memories. Remember the horse at the fair? We both screamed. Your mother laughed so hard. As Brooks spoke, as Ray sang, Melody's heart rate climbed higher than ever. 82 beats per minute. Patricia came running, checked the monitors. No emergency, just a daughter hearing her father. Patricia looked at them both. I'll note all of this in the chart. Dr. Fletcher won't like it. But it's the truth. The breakthrough changed everything and nothing. Dr. Fletcher couldn't ignore the documented evidence. Melody's responses were real, measurable, and consistent. But he also couldn't accept that his months of conventional treatment had failed where a janitor with a song had succeeded. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, and everyone knew it would be a showdown. Ray spent Wednesday night with Kenny, helping with homework and trying to pretend everything was normal. But Kenny saw through him, the way children always do. "Dad, are you in trouble?" the boy asked over dinner. Spaghetti from a box, the only thing Ray knew how to cook reliably. Ray set down his fork, considering how much truth a 9-year-old could handle. "Some people at the hospital don't think I should be helping the sick girl. They think I'm not qualified anymore." Kenny's face scrunched up in that serious way that made him look far older than his years. "But you are helping her. Mrs. Chen says sometimes people don't like it when you prove them wrong. Is that what's happening?" Ray smiled despite everything. "Yeah, buddy, that's exactly what's happening." Kenny nodded firmly. "Then you keep helping her. That's what Mom would say." The mention of Lillian hit Ray in the chest, as it always did. Kenny barely remembered her. He'd been so young when she died. But he held on to the stories Ray told, building a picture of a mother he'd never really known. "You're right," Ray said softly. That's exactly what she'd say. That night, after Kenny fell asleep, Ray pulled out an old photo album he rarely looked at anymore. There she was, Lillian in her white coat, laughing at something off camera. Lillian holding newborn Kenny, her face radiant with exhausted joy. Lillian and Ray on their wedding day, both so young and certain that nothing bad could ever touch them. He touched her face in the photograph, allowing himself to remember not just the end, but the beginning and middle too. The way she'd challenged him in every surgery conference, refusing to let him get away with lazy thinking. The way she'd sing off-key while cooking breakfast, driving him crazy and making him love her more. The way she'd looked at him when he told her he wanted to try the surgery himself, trust and terror warring in her eyes, and trust winning because she believed in him more than he believed in himself. "I'm so sorry, Lil," he whispered to the photograph. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. But maybe I can save someone else's daughter. Maybe that counts for something." Thursday morning arrived too quickly. Ray dropped Kenny at school, hugged him longer than usual, and headed to St. Catherine. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the administrative conference room. When Ray arrived, he found Harrison Brooks already there, dressed in a sharp suit that probably cost more than Ray made in 3 months. "You didn't have to come," Ray said. Brooks shook his head. "Yes, I did. You're here because I asked you to help my daughter. If Fletcher wants to come after you, he goes through me first." Dr. Fletcher entered with 3 other administrators, all carrying folders thick with documentation. The meeting began with cold formality. Fletcher laid out his case methodically. Ray's violation of labor regulations, his unauthorized medical observations, the liability risk to the hospital, the false hope being given to a grieving family. "Mr. Porter abandoned his medical license a decade ago," Fletcher stated, his voice crisp and professional. "He has no authority to be treating patients, no matter what his past credentials were. His presence violates every protocol we have." Brooks leaned forward. "He's not treating anyone. He's singing. Last I checked, that doesn't require a medical license." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "He's making medical observations and recommendations. That's practicing medicine without a license, which is illegal in this state." He pulled out a document. "I've also discovered that Mr. Porter left his previous position under questionable circumstances. He didn't just resign. He abandoned his patients mid-treatment after a personal tragedy. That speaks to character and reliability." Ray felt the words like physical blows. It was all true, all documented, all part of the record he'd tried to leave behind. But Brooks stood up, his voice cutting. "Dr. Fletcher, let me be very clear about something. Ray Porter's past is tragic, but it doesn't define his present. My daughter has shown more neurological response in the past week than she has in 6 months under your care. You can hide behind protocols and regulations all you want, but the fact remains. He's reaching her when you couldn't. Fletcher's face reddened. A few minor variations in vital signs don't constitute neurological recovery. You're seeing what you want to see because you're desperate. I understand that, Harrison. I do. But this man is not the answer. The argument continued, voices rising, other administrators trying to mediate. Ray sat silent through most of it, feeling like a bone being fought over by dogs. Finally, he stood. "Stop!" Everyone turned to look at him. Ray addressed Fletcher directly. "You're right about most of it. I did abandon my practice. I did walk away from my patients. After my wife died, I couldn't function. I let people down. That's on me." He took a breath. "But you're wrong about Melody. Those responses aren't random variations. I've spent 15 years studying the brain, longer than some of your current staff. I know what I'm seeing. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not, auditory stimulation is reaching her in ways your standard protocols haven't." Fletcher started to interrupt, but Ray continued. "Here's what I'm proposing. Give me 3 more days. Full monitoring, complete documentation. If there's no further improvement, I walk away. No fight, no argument. But if there is improvement, you let me continue under whatever supervision you want. Medical staff present at all times. Second opinions on every observation. Whatever makes you comfortable." The room fell silent. One of the other administrators, a woman named Dr. Helen Cartwright, spoke up. "That seems reasonable, Marcus. 3 days of closely monitored trial. If nothing changes, we have our answer. If something does..." She trailed off meaningfully. Fletcher looked like he wanted to argue more, but he was outnumbered. Brooks had influence. The other board members were curious. And somewhere beneath his professional pride, Fletcher was still a doctor who wanted to see patients recover. "Fine," he said tightly. 3 days. But I want hourly documentation. Any deviation from protocol, any sign of declining condition, and this ends immediately." Ray nodded. Agreed. The meeting adjourned with tension still crackling in the air. As people filed out, Brooks pulled Ray aside. "That was well played. Offering to walk away. That was smart." Ray smiled wearily. "Wasn't strategy. I meant it. If I can't help her, I shouldn't be there." Brooks studied him for a moment. "You know what I think. I think you could help her 10 years ago, and you can help her now. You just had to remember that you're still that doctor. Still that man who saves people." That night, Ray approached Melody's room with new determination and new fear. 3 days. 72 hours to prove he wasn't chasing shadows, wasn't giving false hope, wasn't a washed-up doctor pretending he still had something to offer. Patricia met him at the door, her expression kind, but serious. "Dr. Fletcher's assigned me to document everything. Every song, every response, every observation you make. Nothing personal, Ray." He nodded. "I understand. Let's do this right." Brooks arrived shortly after, and this time he brought something Ray hadn't seen before. A worn teddy bear, one ear partially torn, stuffing visible through old stitches. "This was Melody's when she was little," Brooks explained, setting it carefully on the bedside table. "She called him Mr. Buttons, took him everywhere until she was 12, then packed him away, but never threw him out. I found him in her closet at home. The bear looked absurd in the high-tech medical room, a splash of childhood innocence amid machines and monitors, but Ray understood the value. Familiar objects can trigger memory cascades, he said. The brain associates scents, textures, visual cues with emotional experiences. This is good." Brooks also brought a playlist on his phone. Melody's favorite songs from high school and college. Pop music Ray didn't know, but Brooks explained each one. This was her anthem when she graduated high school. This one she played on repeat after her first heartbreak. This one was playing when she got accepted to her dream college. Each song was a piece of Melody's life, a thread connecting past to present. They decided to alternate. Ray would sing the lullabies and classic melodies. Brooks would play Melody's personal soundtrack. Between them, they'd surround her with sound that meant something. The first night of the 3-day trial, they threw everything at it. Ray sang while Brooks held Melody's hand and talked about memories. They played her music. Brooks brought in her favorite perfume and dabbed a tiny amount on her pillow. Patricia documented it all, her pen moving across the chart constantly. And slowly, incrementally, Melody responded. Her heart rate varied with different stimuli. Her breathing changed rhythm. Once, when Brooks was telling a story about Melody's 10th birthday party, her fingers twitched against his palm. "Did you see that?" Brooks's voice cracked with hope and fear. Patricia moved closer, checking. "I saw it. Noted in the chart." Ray felt something shift in his chest. Not certainty. Not yet. But possibility. The thing he'd lost 10 years ago when Lillian died. The belief that sometimes, against all odds, people came back. They continued through the night, taking turns, giving Melody everything they had. By 2 a.m., everyone was exhausted. Brooks's voice was hoarse from talking. Ray's throat hurt from singing, but neither wanted to stop. The second night brought more subtle changes. Melody's eye movements became more pronounced during REM periods. Her muscle tone seemed slightly improved. Patricia noted everything with increasing interest, occasionally calling in other nurses to witness. "I'm not saying it's a miracle," she told Ray during a break, "but it's something. More than we've seen." Dr. Fletcher appeared at midnight, ostensibly to check on his patient, really to observe what Ray was doing. He stood in the doorway for 20 minutes, watching Ray sing, watching Brooks hold his daughter's hand, watching the monitors respond. When he left, he said nothing. But Ray saw something in his expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but a crack in the certainty. On the third night, the final night of the trial, Ray brought Kenny. He'd been hesitant, unsure if a hospital ICU was appropriate for a 9-year-old, but Brooks had encouraged it. Melody loves kids. Before the accident, she volunteered at the Children's Hospital. If Kenny wants to meet her, bring him. So Ray did after dinner, with Kenny clutching his hand nervously as they walked through the hushed corridors. Kenny stared at all the machines with wide eyes. "Is she going to be okay, Dad?" Ray knelt down to his son's level. "I don't know, buddy, but we're trying to help her." "Want to say hi?" Kenny nodded. Brooks was already there, and he smiled when he saw Kenny. "You must be the famous Kenny. Your dad talks about you constantly." Kenny blushed. "He talks about you too, and about Melody." Brooks gestured to the bed. "Well, here she is. Melody, you have visitors." Kenny approached slowly, looking at the unconscious young woman with a child's directness. "She's pretty," he said simply. "Why won't she wake up?" Ray started to explain about brain injuries and comas, but Kenny interrupted. "Can I talk to her? Sometimes when I'm sad, Dad sings to me and I feel better. Maybe she needs someone to talk to her like a friend, not like a doctor." Out of the mouths of babes. Ray looked at Brooks, who nodded. "Go ahead, Kenny. Tell her whatever you want." Kenny pulled a chair close to the bed, his legs dangling off the edge. "Hi, Melody. I'm Kenny. My dad's the one who's been singing to you. He sings to me too, when I can't sleep or when I'm scared. He has a good voice, even though he thinks he doesn't." Brooks smiled through sudden tears. Kenny continued, his voice soft but clear. "My mom died when I was really little. I don't remember her much, but Dad tells me stories. He says she was brave and smart, and she loved me a lot. I bet your mom was like that too." The room fell silent except for Kenny's gentle voice. "Dad gets sad sometimes. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. He tries to be happy for me, but I know he misses Mom. I miss her too, even though I can't remember her face without looking at pictures. Do you miss your mom? Melody's heart rate climbed, 65 to 72. Ray's breath caught. Kenny kept talking, oblivious to the monitors. I think you should wake up. Your dad misses you a lot. He sits here every night talking to you. He brought your teddy bear. That means he really loves you, because dads don't usually remember stuff like teddy bears. Brooks let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Kenny reached out and carefully touched Melody's hand. It's okay to be scared. When I'm scared, I hold Dad's hand, and it helps. So I'm holding yours now. See? You're not alone. For the next 10 minutes, Kenny talked to Melody the way only a child can, without self-consciousness, without medical jargon, without the weight of expectation. He told her about his school, about his favorite video game, about how Mrs. Chen made the best dumplings in the world. And Melody's body responded to every word. Her fingers moved against Kenny's small hand. Her eyelids fluttered more rapidly. Her breathing pattern changed distinctly. Patricia was writing so fast, her pen was practically smoking. When Kenny finally finished and climbed down from the chair, he looked at Ray with complete confidence. She heard me, Dad. I know she did. Ray pulled his son into a hug, his throat too tight to speak. Brooks knelt down to Kenny's level. Thank you, he said hoarsely. Thank you for talking to my daughter. That night, after Ray took Kenny home and returned alone, something changed in Brooks's approach. He stopped recounting memories and started talking to Melody about now, about today, about the future. Melody, I know I wasn't always the father you needed. I gave you things instead of time, money instead of presence. I thought providing for you meant working constantly, building an empire you'd inherit. But you never wanted an empire. You wanted a dad who'd watch movies with you, who'd remember your favorite ice cream flavor, who'd just sit with you without his phone buzzing every 5 minutes. Ray continued singing softly in the background, while Brooks unburdened himself. When you wake up, not if, when, things are going to be different. I'm cutting back at the company, promoting some people, delegating more, because I've spent 6 months in this room realizing that all the money in the world means nothing if I lose you. You're my daughter. You're all I have left of your mother. And I love you more than any business deal, any acquisition, any amount of money. As Brooks spoke, as his voice broke and steadied and broke again, Melody's monitor showed sustained elevation. Not spikes, sustained changes. Her heart rate stayed between 75 and 80. Her brainwave activity increased measurably. Patricia called in another nurse, then another. By midnight, there were 4 medical staff in the room, all watching, all documenting. Dr. Fletcher was paged. He arrived 20 minutes later, still in street clothes, clearly pulled from home. He reviewed the charts in silence, checked Melody's pupils with a pen light, examined her reflexes. This is significant, he finally admitted, his voice tight. More neurological activity than we've seen since admission. He looked at Ray. I don't understand how this is working. Ray stood, facing Fletcher. Because healing isn't just medical. It's emotional, psychological, spiritual. Melody's body might be injured, but her mind is searching for reasons to come back. We're giving her those reasons. Her father's voice, familiar sounds, the knowledge that people love her, need her, want her to fight. Fletcher's expression was complicated, professional skepticism warring with human hope. I want a full neurological workup in the morning, MRI, updated EEG, complete assessment. If the changes hold, if they're real improvements and not temporary fluctuations. He trailed off, unable to quite admit he might have been wrong. The 4th day began with a flurry of tests. Melody was wheeled to radiology, subjected to scans and assessments that took hours. Ray wasn't allowed in the examination rooms, so he sat in the waiting area with Brooks, both of them silent with tension. Around noon, Dr. Fletcher emerged with a folder of results and an expression Ray couldn't read. "The MRI shows decreased swelling in several key areas," Fletcher said without preamble. "The EEG indicates increased cortical activity, particularly in regions associated with auditory processing and emotional response. Her Glasgow coma scale has improved from a 5 to a 7. Brooks stood up slowly. "What does that mean?" "In plain English?" Fletcher looked between them. "It means she's improving. Measurably, documentably improving. I can't explain the mechanism fully, but the auditory stimulation protocol appears to be reaching her in ways standard treatment didn't." He paused, and Ray saw how much it cost him to say the next words. "Mr. Porter, I was wrong. Not about the protocols. Those exist for good reasons. But about you. You saw something I didn't. You tried something I wouldn't have. And it's working." Ray felt relief and vindication, and a dozen other emotions he couldn't name. "So I can continue?" Fletcher nodded. "Under medical supervision, with continued monitoring. But yes, continue." He held out his hand. Ray shook it, feeling the older doctor's grip, firm, professional, and just slightly apologetic. After Fletcher left, Brooks turned to Ray with tears streaming down his face. "She's coming back. My daughter is coming back." Ray wanted to caution him, to explain that improvement didn't guarantee full recovery, that there were still so many unknowns. But looking at this father's face, seeing hope replace despair, Ray just nodded. "She's fighting, and we're going to keep fighting with her." The next 3 nights were a continuation of everything they'd done, but with new confidence. Medical staff came and went, documenting, observing, occasionally asking questions. Ray sang, Brooks talked. They played Melody's music, and Melody continued improving in small, steady increments. Her muscle tone increased. Her reflexes became more responsive. The periods of REM-like eye movement grew longer and more frequent. On the 7th night, exactly 2 weeks after Ray had first noticed her responses, something extraordinary happened. Ray was singing, "You Are My Sunshine," for what felt like the 1,000th time. Brooks was holding Melody's hand, his eyes closed, just listening. The room was dim, peaceful, filled with the soft melody. And then, so quietly that Ray almost missed it, a voice joined his. Not loud, not strong, but unmistakably there. "Please don't take my sunshine away." Ray's voice faltered. His eyes shot to Melody's face. Her lips were moving, barely forming the words, her voice hoarse from months of disuse. But she was singing. Brooks's eyes flew open. "Melody, baby, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Not the unconscious flutter they'd seen before, but deliberate movement. Struggling. Trying. And then, slowly, impossibly, Melody Brooks opened her eyes. They were unfocused at first, confused, struggling to adjust to the light. But they were open. She was awake. Patricia ran for the call button, summoning staff. Within seconds, the room filled with nurses, residents, Dr. Fletcher appearing almost instantly. They shone lights in Melody's eyes, checked her pupils, asked her questions she was too overwhelmed to answer yet. But through it all, her eyes kept returning to 2 people. The man holding her hand, sobbing openly, saying, "Melody, my baby, you're back." And the stranger standing by her bed, still holding his worn notepad, tears running down his face. "Dad?" Melody's voice was a whisper, rough and uncertain. Brooks pressed her hand to his face. "I'm here. I'm right here. You're safe." Melody's gaze moved to Ray. You were singing. I heard you. In the dark. Your voice." She struggled to find words. "Like my dad. My real dad. The one who died. Understanding hit Ray like a wave. Not her current father. The father who had died when she was 7. The father who used to sing, "You are my sunshine," to his little girl before tragedy took him away. Melody had spent 6 months in darkness, searching for a reason to come back, and she'd found it in a voice that reminded her of love, safety, childhood. She'd followed that voice like a beacon, climbing back to consciousness one song at a time. Brooks looked at Ray with something beyond gratitude, with the understanding that this janitor had given him back his daughter by being willing to sing the songs his own daughter no longer had a father to sing. The medical team worked quickly, efficiently, checking Melody's neurological status, adjusting medications, running tests. She was weak, confused, exhausted. They warned that recovery would be long, that there would be physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. But she was awake, conscious, responsive. After the initial flurry of medical activity calmed, after Melody had been stabilized and assessed, Ray slipped quietly toward the door. His part was done. She was awake. She had her father. She had professional medical care. The janitor who sang was no longer needed. "Wait." Melody's voice stopped him. Ray turned. She was looking at him with eyes that were clearer now, more focused. "Who are you?" Ray smiled gently. "Just someone who works here. Someone who wanted to help." Brooks stood. "Melody, this is Ray Porter. He's the one who never stopped believing you'd wake up. He's the one who sang to you every night." Melody studied Ray's face, her expression thoughtful despite her obvious exhaustion. "You're a doctor. I can tell. The way you move, the way you look at the monitors." Ray shook his head. "I used to be, not anymore." Melody reached out a weak hand. Ray moved closer, taking it carefully. Her grip was faint, but real. "Thank you," she whispered, "for singing to me, for reminding me what it felt like to be loved." Ray's throat tightened. "You were always loved. Your father never left your side." Melody's eyes shifted to Brooks, filling with tears. "I know. I hurt him too. Both of you, pulling me back." Over the next 2 weeks, Melody's recovery progressed in the way these things do. Frustratingly slow, day by day, but remarkable when viewed in total. She regained strength, relearned how to sit up, stand, walk with assistance. Her speech improved from whispers to full sentences. Her memory had some gaps, but cognition was intact. The medical team called it extraordinary. Dr. Fletcher, to his credit, included Ray's auditory stimulation protocol in the case study he was writing, citing it as a breakthrough approach for coma patients. Ray returned to his janitor position, working his regular shifts, mopping the same floors he'd always mopped. But something had changed. Dr. Fletcher approached him one evening as he cleaned the corridor outside the ICU. "Mr. Porter, I've been thinking. Your medical license lapsed, but it could be reinstated. It would require testing, evaluations, a probationary period. But if you were interested..." Ray leaned on his mop, considering. "I appreciate that, Dr. Fletcher. But I have a son who needs me. Medical residencies require 80-hour weeks. I can't do that to Kenny again." Fletcher nodded slowly. "What if there was another option? Part-time consultation work, music therapy program development. You'd work with our coma patients, implement the protocols you used with Melody, train staff, 20 hours a week, decent pay, flexible schedule." Ray stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" Fletcher almost smiled. "I'm offering you a chance to do what you're clearly meant to do, just in a different way than before. Think about it." Ray did think about it. He thought about it during his shift, during the bus ride home, during dinner with Kenny. Finally, he asked his son, "What would you think if Dad went back to being a doctor? Not like before, but part-time. I'd still be home for you, but I'd also be helping people who were sick." Kenny's face lit up. "Like you helped Melody?" Ray nodded. "Yeah, like that." Kenny grinned. "That's awesome, Dad. Mom would be proud." The simple certainty in his son's voice decided it. 6 months later, Ray stood in room 304 again, but this time wearing a name badge that read, Raymond Porter, Medical Consultant, Music Therapy. He was training a new team of nurses on auditory stimulation techniques for their coma patients. Through the window, he could see Brooks and Melody walking down the corridor. She was volunteering now, spending time with other coma patients' families, offering hope from someone who'd been there. She saw Ray and waved, her smile bright and healthy. Brooks had kept his word about changing his priorities. He'd stepped back from daily operations at his company, promoted a CEO to handle the day-to-day, and spent more time with Melody. They'd come to the hospital together often, both of them drawn back to the place where they'd almost lost everything, and somehow found it again. Ray waved back, then turned to his trainees. "The key is consistency and intention. You're not just playing background music. You're creating a pathway home for someone lost in darkness. Never underestimate the power of familiar sounds, of love expressed through melody." His phone buzzed. A text from Kenny. "Dad, don't forget you promised to help with my science project tonight. Mr. Chen is helping too." Ray smiled. The old man from next door had become part of their small, cobbled-together family, along with Mrs. Chen, who still made those incredible dumplings, and occasionally watched Kenny when Ray's schedule shifted. Their life wasn't perfect. Money was still tight. The apartment was still small, but it was full of people who cared, full of purpose, full of the kind of wealth that couldn't be deposited in a bank. That evening, after his shift ended, Ray didn't change out of his consultant badge. He wore it on the bus ride home, feeling the weight of it, lighter than a surgeon's coat, but meaningful in its own way. He'd spent 10 years believing he'd failed, that walking away from medicine meant walking away from who he was. But he'd learned something in room 304, singing to a girl he barely knew, connecting with a father he'd never met before. Healing wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about saving everyone. It was about showing up, about trying, about being willing to care even when caring hurt. When Ray opened the door to his apartment, Kenny rushed to hug him, Mr. Chen right behind carrying supplies for the science project. "Dad, we're building a model brain. Mr. Chen says we can use clay and paint and everything." Ray laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "A brain, huh? I might know a thing or two about those." As they spread out supplies across the kitchen table, as Kenny chattered about neurons and synapses with the enthusiasm only a 9-year-old could muster, Ray felt something he hadn't felt in a decade: peace. His phone rang, Brooks's number. Ray answered, and before he could say hello, Brooks spoke. "Ray, I wanted to let you know. Melody's been accepted into a graduate program for music therapy. She wants to work with trauma patients, use what happened to her to help others." Ray felt pride swell in his chest. "That's wonderful. She's going to be amazing at it." Brooks paused. "She wanted me to tell you that you inspired her, that watching her recovery taught her that broken things can heal, that people who fall can rise again, that it's never too late for a second chance." Ray looked at Kenny, covered in clay, grinning with pure joy. Looked at Mr. Chen, patiently explaining science concepts with broken English and infinite kindness. Thought about Melody, awake and planning her future. Thought about Brooks, learning to be a father instead of just a provider. Thought about all the coma patients who'd have someone singing to them now, offering them a path back to the light. "Tell her I said the same thing," Ray replied, "about second chances. Tell her I'm grateful." After he hung up, Kenny looked up from his project. Was that Melody's dad? Ray nodded. Yep. Melody's doing really well. She's going to help other people, like we helped her. Kenny returned to his clay brain, adding careful detail to the temporal lobe. That's good. Hey, Dad? Ray sat down at the table, ready to help. Yeah, buddy? Kenny smiled, that smile that made every hardship worth it. I'm glad you're a doctor again. But I'm more glad you're my dad. Ray reached across the table and squeezed his son's shoulder. Me too, Kenny. Me too. In that small apartment, with its peeling linoleum and second-hand furniture, with clay scattered across the table and laughter filling the kitchen, Ray Porter finally understood what he'd spent 10 years searching for. He'd thought he'd lost everything when Lillian died. His career, his identity, his purpose. But he'd been wrong. He'd lost one version of himself and found another. The surgeon who couldn't save his wife had become the father who'd save his son every day, just by being present. The doctor who walked away had become the man who walked back, on his own terms, in his own time. And sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, Ray would sit by Kenny's bed and sing softly, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray." The same song he'd sung to Melody. The same song Lillian had sung to Kenny as a baby. The same melody that had pulled a girl back from darkness and pulled a man back from despair. It was just a song, simple words, simple tune. But it carried weight. The weight of love, of memory, of connection. The weight of everything that mattered. In room 304 at St. Catherine Hospital, the bed was empty now, cleaned and ready for the next patient who'd need it. But if you listened closely in the quiet hours of the night, you might hear an echo, a melody floating through the corridors, a reminder that healing comes in unexpected forms, that sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't found in a pill or a procedure, but in a simple act of human kindness, in a song sung by calloused hands that once held scalpels, in a voice that refused to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only option left. Ray Porter had learned, finally, that you don't measure a life by the surgeries performed, or the degrees earned, or the money made. You measure it by the people who miss you when you're gone, by the lives you touch in small and large ways, by the courage to keep trying even after you've failed. He'd failed to save his wife, but he'd saved his son by being there, day after day, through poverty and struggle and doubt. And he'd saved Melody by remembering that medicine is as much art as science, as much heart as skill. The janitor who became a consultant, the surgeon who became a father, the man who walked away and found his way back. Ray Porter's story wasn't the one he'd planned. It was better. It was real. It was his. And as he sat in his small apartment, helping his son build a clay brain, surrounded by people who'd become family, Ray finally understood what Lillian had tried to tell him in those last moments before she died. "Love them," she'd whispered. "That's all that matters. Just love them." He'd thought she meant Kenny, and she did, but she'd meant more than that. She'd meant everyone, every patient, every stranger, every lost soul searching for a way back home. Ray looked at the medical consultant badge on his chest, then at his son's smiling face, then out the window where stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Melody Brooks was planning her future. Harrison Brooks was learning to be a father. Dr. Fletcher was implementing new protocols that would help countless patients. Mrs. Chen was making dumplings. Mr. Chen was sharing his quiet kindness. And Kenny, precious, resilient Kenny, was building a model brain with clay and hope and the certainty that his father was exactly who he needed to be. It wasn't the life Ray had imagined. It was better. It was enough. It was everything. And when he laid his head down that night, exhausted but content, Ray Porter slept without nightmares for the first time in 10 years. In his dreams, Lillian was singing, and Melody was awake, and Kenny was laughing, and all the broken pieces had finally found a way to fit back together into something beautiful and whole and worth every moment of the journey it took to get there.